If you've been wanting to try 3D carvings on your CNC but felt a little intimidated, this video is for you. We'll be walking through the material selection, the bit selection, and exactly how to program it on VCarve Pro or Aspire, step by step. So by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to do your first 3D carving and you'll no longer be intimidated. Let's go. So in order to successfully do any 3D carves or 3D relief carves, you need to get 4 things right: material selection, bit selection, programming, and actually the running of the CNC machine. So the very first thing is material selection, and this one's the easiest. For me personally, you need to find a dense, tight wood, and so I like things like maple, cherry, walnut. Woods like this are going to show a lot of the detail. They're not going to compress too much and going to give you a really high quality carving. Other stuff like sapele is also a good option. Any kind of mahoganies, those are going to work good for you. I would avoid softwoods like pine or cedar because what happens during the carving is that since these lines are so far apart, you're going to get 1, some fuzzies, and 2, you're not going to see a ton of detail if you are trying to do an intricate carving like this eagle right here. And since these do take quite a while on the CNC, might as well get some nicer wood like that walnut or this maple. So for this carving, we'll be using hard maple because this is going to show you really good detail in the carving. The second thing you'll need is the correct bits. Now for most 3D carvings, you'll be using one of 3 tapered ball nose bits. And so these are bits that start with a larger diameter shank and then taper down to a ball nose, hence the term tapered ball nose. Now each one of these has varying diameters, and each time you decrease the diameter of the bit, your cut time is going to increase, but your detail is also going to increase. And this is something I'll show you later in the programming side. Just understand you'll be using some version of a tapered ball nose bit. The next thing you'll need is some type of a bit to clear out material. So we'll be using this Golden Boy rougher today, but any upcut or downcut bit is going to work just fine. So as long as you have one of these and one of these, you're set and ready to go. Now, let's head on over to the programming. The modeling software we're using today is going to be VCarve Pro version 12, but if you are using a later version like VCarve Pro version 11 or even Aspire version 11 or 12, all of this is going to work exactly the same. Now, when setting up a job for a 3D model, it's really important that you try to get the height and the width as close to the carving size as possible, because the size of the job does affect the modeling resolution. So what I mean by that is if you look at this modeling resolution right here, it says it's going to do 1,000,000 points. And that is 1,000,000 points across the size of your job. And so if your carving is really small, but you make this a massive job, then your 1,000,000 points are going to be really spread out, if that makes sense. And so we're going to keep it tight. And then you can also adjust the modeling resolution for high, very high, depending on your job size. But for a small carve like this, just do a standard modeling resolution. That's going to be fine. And we'll be using a center origin today. Now to get our 3D model in here, there's a few different ways to do it. We can import a 3D model, or we can just use the clip art that is provided with Vectric. And so this is the way we're going to be doing it today. Now on VCarve Pro, you can't really actually model too much of your own stuff. That's going to be more on the Aspire side, but you will have to pay for that, and it's really hard. But if you are that good, you can definitely do it. So today, for simplicity's sake, we're just going to import some clip art that is already preloaded and comes with VCarve Pro. And so I want to do an animal like I showed y'all guys earlier, and I want to do this horse that has a dish behind it. So I simply just double click it and it's going to come to the center, or I can drag. So there's a couple different ways to do it, all of which are relatively simple. Now, once we have this model in here, I'm going to switch views so y'all can see it in both the 3D version and the 2D version. So right now we're looking at the 2D version, And on the 3D version, you can actually see what this horse looks like just by clicking up here at the tab. And so in order to see both, I'm actually going to split the views up like this so we can see both the 2D version and the 3D version on the same exact screen. Now, the first thing we want to do is adjust the size of the 3D carving to our needs. And there's a couple ways to do this. Way number one is coming over here to the transform selected object size. And we can just click that button. And let's just say we want to make this 7 inches. And you click apply and it's going to make it 7 inches. Now that's how to do it in the 2D version. In the 3D version, you can come over here and you can actually type in exactly what you want. And of course, you always have the option to scale it up or down just using that on either the 2D or the 3D modeling side. So for me, in my simple jack self, I'm just going to use the selected object size and we're going to keep it right at 7 inches. And we're going to make sure it's centered in the exact center of our object by pushing F9. So now that we have the correct size, I'll show you what I meant by modeling resolution. So if we make this big and you zoom into it, you can see all of these tiny little squares right there. And those are all the pixels that is making up your 3D project. And so if we were to change that modeling resolution to even more pixels, you're going to see a huge change in the overall modeling quality of this horse. And so it adds a whole bunch of more squares. But for something like this, I don't really think we need a super high modeling resolution. You're going to get the same exact results either way. It looks a little fuzzier, but it's going to get carved out just fine. So the next thing we want to do is adjust the height of this. So if you look from the side, we are going to determine how thick this is. Now there's also 2 ways of doing this. The one way is on the 3D modeling tabs on the left side in your design tabs. And that's going to be right over here in the scale Z height of the model. And so if we click that, we can simply just adjust the height up or down on this slider bar and make it super deep or not so deep. And you have a very thin dish, just like that. I like to do the set exact height button. And so we're going to click that. And because this material is 7/8 of an inch thick, so 0.875, I'm going to leave a 1/4 inch on the back of it. And so we're going to come in at 5/8 of an inch. So I'll click that, close, hit OK. And now we have the adjusted size of our 3D carving. Now, another way to do it is to actually click on the 3D modeling side, and you can adjust it over here with these 3 buttons. And so I want to adjust the overall model size. So I'll just simply click that. And if I want to go to 1/4 of an inch, I'll type that in, hit enter, and it adjusts it right there on the 3D modeling side. But for now, we'll keep it 5/8 of an inch. So as far as messing around with your 3D model on the design tab, that's about as complicated as it gets for what we're going to be doing today. You simply just scale it up or down and make it thicker or thinner. Like, that's really it. Not going to try to overcomplicate this. So the 2 toolpaths to cut out this horse is going to be the 3D roughing and the 3D finishing toolpaths. That's the 2 we're going to use. So the first thing we have to do is the 3D roughing toolpath. And let me quickly hit calculate right here so you can see exactly what it's going to do. Then I'll explain why it's doing it. So right here, as you can see, this rougher is removing the bulk of the material. Therefore, the finisher can actually go back by and remove the rest of the material to give you this finished looking horse. So there's a couple different things in this roughing toolpath that we can adjust. First off, the bit I am going to be using is the Golden Boy Upcut Rougher. And that's simply a 1/4 inch bit. And I have it going at 100 inches a minute and 50 on the plunge rate. And if your CNC can handle it, I do advise actually increasing the step over because this is never going to get seen. It's just going to take up some time. Now the pass depth does matter on this 3D roughing toolpath. And so we're going to set that to 0.15 inches. The next thing you're going to see is the machining limit boundary. And there's a couple different ways to select what this rougher is going to machine out. And so the model boundary, if you select this one, it's only going to machine the circle of your model. If you select material boundary, it's going to do everything that's in your job setup. That's why earlier I said it's important to keep the job setup tight on your 3D carving, because if you do select material boundary, it can take a really long time if you don't have the selected job set up correctly. And the next one is going to be your selected vector. So let's just say, for instance, you only wanted to carve out this part of the horse. And so all you'd simply do there is select the selected vector button, select the vector and your model, and click calculate. And as you can see, it's only going to pocket out whatever is inside of that circle that you have on the 3D side. So for this carving, we're not going to do the selected vector. We're going to be selecting the model boundary. Now there is different uses and functions for these, but that's for a different time and a different video. Now, this machining allowance right here, I like to have it at 0.06 inches. And what this is the amount of material it leaves for the next toolpath, the finishing toolpath, to take off. And so it's really important to leave some amount of material for two different reasons. One, it's so that finishing bit can actually have a little bit of material to eat, right? And actually have a correct chip. The other reason is if you're off on your Z height a little bit, you won't actually see the lines from the roughing bit. So I like to keep that at 0.06 inches. The next thing is how we rough it out. We have the Z level strategy and the 3D raster strategy. So first, let me show you this 3D raster strategy. And we're going to use a raster angle of 90 degrees. Because our grain is vertical, we want it to be at a 90-degree angle so that the roughing part goes with the grain of the wood. Really, it's not that big of a deal if you go at 0 degrees or 45 degrees, but for this, I'm just going to go at 90 degrees. So let's be sure we have the model boundary machining limit selected and hit calculate. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to treat that rougher as a finishing bit. And what you're going to see is that the rougher goes up and down just like that finishing bit is going to have to do later. And this way works, but I have learned it just takes a long time and it's really not necessary from my experience. So I personally do not like the 3D raster method, but now you know what it is. I prefer the Z level method. And so what we're going to do on the Z level method is that it's going to pocket down all the areas that it needs to do level by level. And I'm going to run a profile pass last. Now, if you do want to save some time, you can select none. I haven't had a problem either way, so it doesn't really matter in all honesty. But for this, we're going to select last. Now we're going to keep that 90-degree raster angle and we're going to have a slight plunge. Now keep in mind, we're using this roughing bit, so we're only running it at 100 inches a minute, but I have ran it much faster in the past. So simply hit calculate. It's going to give us this little flag. Click OK. We'll view it, and you can see the difference between both of those roughing toolpaths. Now, believe it or not, you'll still get the same result on the finish no matter the strategy. And the other one took 16 minutes, and this one takes 5 minutes. So a huge difference in time on the roughing strategy. Now, the finishing toolpath is where the overall quality and the overall time it takes on your CNC really comes into play. So for this horse, we do have an ample amount of detail, so we'll be using the tapered ball nose bit. Now, which tapered ball nose bit? We don't know yet until we run some models. And so over here, we're going to select one of the 3 tapered ball nose bits that CIC Workshop offers. One of these is a pretty thick one, and that's going to be a 1/16 radius tapered ball nose, then we're going to slowly go down the list and figure out which bit we want to choose. So first up is that 1/16 tapered ball nose. And we definitely don't want to use both, and so we're going to remove that other bit. Now, as far as feeds and speeds go, I personally like running these at around 150 inches a minute because my Shapeoko can handle it. But if you need to run slower, definitely do that. But I will say keep the feed rate and the plunge rate exactly the same. Now, as far as step over goes, a common range for 3D carvings is going to be 8% up to 12% step over. So for this carving, we're going to run at a 10% step over. And what that is how much your bit is moving over and how much little waves that you may or may not see in the carving. Now we're going to select the same machining boundary that we did on the roughing toolpath, and that's going to be the model boundary. Now, since we did not have a boundary offset in the roughing toolpath, we're going to keep this at a 0. And what that boundary offset is it'll just carve a little extra on the outside of your carving. And so if you were to set this at 1 inch, it's just going to go 1 inch over and do 1 inch all the way on the outside of the carving. And for this particular carving, we really don't need that because it's a dish in the middle of the wood. So no real boundary offset needed. Now, the next thing we need to look at is offset versus raster. And so I'll do this first one in offset, and then I'll show you that raster. So we'll simply hit calculate. And these typically take a while to calculate because there is so many lines. And so if we were to decrease that step over, let's say down to 8%, you would have a ton more lines in here, and it would take about 20% longer on the overall time. And so that 3D roughing toolpath took 5 minutes, and this 3D finishing toolpath is going to take 42 minutes. Now, see how that bit started in the center and went outward? That's because we had a offset toolpath selected. Now, me personally, I like to do a raster going with the grain, just like I did on the rougher. And so I'm going to do a raster with a 90-degree angle, and that's going to make that bit go vertical instead of around and around. And the reason I do that is just, I don't like the bit cutting across the grain of the wood, but that's just my personal preference. So now if we look at it going, it's going to go vertical just like that. Now, one little trick to do if this modeling resolution isn't good for you is to actually go up to the Toolpaths tab, and then you can actually adjust the simulation quality right here. And so let's just say we want to select very high. We're going to click that. And now when we view it, it may take a little bit longer, but you're going to get a lot more definition, and you're going to see exactly what that bit is going to show throughout this model. But it's definitely a heck of a lot slower. So you can definitely see some of the marks left by that 1/16 radius tapered ball nose. Now, in a previous video, I put the 1/16, the 1/32, and the 1/64 radius tapered ball nose head to head. And each time I decreased the radius of the tapered ball nose bit, the time doubled, but the quality did increase. So here's a photo showing each bit in detail of what you can expect on roughly a 5-inch by 7-inch carving. So now let me put in the 1/32 tapered ball nose so I can show you the difference in time on both of these bits. So we simply select that, and I'm gonna go back and make sure that my feed rate is exactly the same. Now, why I'm spending so much time on this is because it is literally the biggest factor in the overall outcome of your 3D carving and the overall quality and the time. So let's look at the 1/32 tapered ball nose versus the 1/16 tapered ball nose. Now do notice the 1/16 takes 43 minutes, but the 1/32 is going to take an hour and 26 minutes. So like I said, when you decrease the diameter of that bit, you are going to double the time. But let's see how that affects quality. So you can definitely see a lot more detail and a lot less lines made by that tapered ball nose bit, but it does definitely increase the time. Now me personally, I like this horse a lot better than the 1/16 tapered ball nose horse, so I'll be using the 1/32 for today's carve. Now, if you are new to beginner carvings, I do have the 3D carving beginner bit set on CIC Workshop, where I do include the 1/32, the 1/16, and the Golden Boy rougher, so you can do 3D carvings. And if you want the advanced set, I do add the additional 1/64 tapered ball nose and the 1/4 inch tapered ball nose. This way you have every single possible bit for every single 3D carving scenario in your bit arsenal. So now that we know we're using that 1/32 tapered ball nose, we can preview our full toolpath here. So first we have it roughing out with that roughing bit level by level. Next, we're coming back with that 1/32 tapered ball nose to do all of that detail work. If I pause it right here, you can definitely see how much material that finishing bit is eating. And that's why I like going 0.15 inches on that roughing toolpath, because if this is too thick and let's say it's way up here, it may snap the very tip of that bit. But overall, that horse is going to look good. 150 inches a minute is going to be just fine, and 10% step over is going to be just fine. So that's how it's going to look. Let's go cut it out. So now we're at the CNC, our maple is held down, we have our center origin marked. First up is the roughing bit to clear away all that material. I'm gonna chalk it up and we'll hit go. Let's do it. So the rougher just got finished clearing out this material. Time to put this 1/32 radius tapered ball nose in the CNC, and make sure when you put it in there, you do not reset your XY0. Do not reset that. The only thing you need to do is touch off to the top of the material and reset your Z height. Now I'm using the Shapeoko today, so it has this automatic bit setter, so it's gonna do it for me automatically, but just be sure, never reset your XY, only reset your Z0 whenever you're doing carvings. If you don't, you'll ruin the whole thing, so don't do that. Now, if you're not comfortable with putting these tapered ball nose bits in a tool database, I do have tool database downloads available on CIC Workshop with all of my tapered ball nose bits already loaded up into it. Check it out. So once that tapered ball nose bit is finished, your project is ready to go. All you need is a little bit of cleanup work with a wire brush and some nylon wheels, and you'll be good to go. Now, if you want me to make a whole video over a finishing process, let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, you can now confidently do a 3D carving. So if you're getting value from this video, definitely check out our CNC bits and our materials. I would love to be your new supplier. And if you want to see how to speed up your 3D carvings, check out this video right here. And as always, guys, remember, if you ain't cutting it close, you ain't cutting it right.